and welcome to Adaptation, where we talk about film adaptations and the original material they're based on. I'm Kendall Bryant, and due to a little web series you might have heard of, we've been really into Louisa May Alcott's Little Women lately. Now, I personally haven't watched the March Family Letters yet because I had some weird notion about keeping my mind clear for when we actually did our podcast on the novel. But luckily, that is going to be out in the next couple of days, and if it's already out when you're watching this, there will be a link right here so that you can go and listen to that. This video, however, is the first of two where I'm going to be talking about the film adaptations of the novel. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and the timing was right for it, so I'm really excited because I'm a huge fan of the book and the movies. In this video, I'm going to be covering the 1933 and the 1949 versions, and then in the next one, I'm going to be covering the 78 version and the 94 version. But these aren't the only adaptations. There is a lot of them. There are 2 animated series, there's 2 BBC series, there's 2 silent films, there's a musical, all of which I haven't actually seen yet, but maybe I will see them in the future, and then we'll come back and talk more about this because I obviously can't get enough. I have 4 versions of the movie. I own 4 versions. You don't even want to know how many editions of the book I own. That's really, I can't stop. I have a problem. Little Women is easily top 5 favorite books for me, but I'm not precious about it like some people are with their favorite books. In fact, I like the movies equally and sometimes better than I like the book, which is rare. This is actually the first time that I've watched the 1933 version and about the 500th time I've watched the 1949 version. And they are really, really similar. I mean, this is basically a remake of that, instead of necessarily another adaptation of the book. But there are some differences between them, so I'm going to list some that I like and some that I don't like for each, and then hopefully we can have some more discussion about that in the comments. The 1933 film stars Katharine Hepburn and Joan Bennett and was directed by George Cukor. And the biggest thing I think that stood out to me, I have to say, is that there's some really intense overacting happening sometimes. Like the scene where Joe refuses Laurie, he always reacts a bit dramatically, but in this scene he's like a petulant child. He's so upset, and it's kind of hilarious, actually. And also there's a scene where Mr. March comes home and Beth walks from the couch to him, and I swear she's channeling Frankenstein. But something that I'd really like to hear other opinions about is Hepburn's portrayal of Joe, because I found it a little odd at first until I felt like I kind of figured out what she was trying to do with the character. She really plays up the awkward angle in the movie, and Joe is definitely supposed to be awkward, but she plays her as kind of a nervous awkward, which is not really how I see Joe, so I might be a little biased and I'd like to hear what other people think. On the more positive side, this movie keeps a bunch of things that I really love. First, the play that the girls put on in the beginning has the sets all decorated exactly like it's described in the book, and it shows other girls coming in and watching them perform instead of having them just kind of playing with each other, which I think is really important. Second, even though it's like a 10-minute scene, this movie actually shows Amy and Laurie together in Europe, and some movies kind of neglect that, so it's super weird when they end up married. I do think that the end of this movie gets a little choppy because it's switching between characters and locations and things like that, and having this scene in there doesn't really help that feeling, so it has pros and cons, I guess. But my favorite inclusion in this film, by far, is the reunion between Joe and Laurie. This is hands down my favorite part of the book, and although a lot of it's cut out for this scene, they keep more of it in than any of the other movies and are really accurate to how the scene progresses. And the tone of it is just really important to me because it shows how the two are such good friends and how they can just pick right back up again. And the actors do a really good job of going from teasing each other to having a serious conversation and then back to teasing again. Basically, the movie could have completely sucked and this scene would have saved it for me. Of course, it didn't suck. It's still not my favorite, but I do think that it adapts the book pretty well, and despite some of the overacting issues, it is a really good watch. But here is where I get really, really biased, because I absolutely love the 1949 version directed by Mervyn LeRoy and starring a whole bunch of really awesome people. I mean, June Allison, Margaret O'Brien, Janet Leigh, Elizabeth Taylor, Peter Lawford. Lots of awesome in this movie. One of the things that really makes it for me is June Allison is my Jo. She's exactly what I pictured. She's exactly the personality that I imagined Jo having, and she's just so great. Her line delivery in this movie is spot on. Her timing is great, and she just makes it so fun to watch. One of the lines that I absolutely love that they kept from the book is when Jo catches Meg and John Brooke together, and she runs to her mother and says, "John Brooke is acting dreadfully, and Meg likes it!" As if she can't understand that someone would actually like being proposed to. And this line, it gets me every time. Her delivery of it, her running up the stairs, the whole thing is just so perfect. Additionally, Margaret O'Brien is also my favorite Beth. They supposedly switched Beth and Amy's ages in the film to match the ages of the actresses, so that Beth was the younger one, but I don't think they actually say it in the movie, which is good because I think that Margaret O'Brien has this kind of like wise look about her in it that makes me believe that she could actually be older than Amy despite the fact that she's smaller than her. And fun, slightly sad fact, Margaret O'Brien actually did such a good job in the scene where she's telling Jo that she's okay with dying that June Allison couldn't stop crying and they had to send her home for the day. And I can totally relate. But on to things that I don't like about this movie. They're kind of nitpicky, but bear with me. First is the gift exchange at the beginning, which they changed from the book a little bit so that all the girls get something for themselves and then they go and exchange them for gifts from Army once they realize that they're being a little selfish. And it kind of bothers me that they take this moment away from Amy because she's arguably the least likable sister. And I like how in the book she takes the initiative to go and exchange her gift herself because she realized she's been a little more selfish than the other girls. But I'd really love for somebody to weigh in on this because I have a feeling that there are benefits to both ways. I just have a personal preference for the Amy redeeming herself one. And another thing that they changed that bothers me even more, like 100 times more to be quite honest, because it bothers me so much, is Laurie's reaction to Jo getting paid $1 for her story. He laughs. He laughs in this version and says something about how he can't understand why she would work so long and hard and miss out on fun with him just to get paid $1. In the book, he celebrates with her and is really excited and happy for her. I think that what the movie was trying to do was show us that they weren't that good as a couple, but what it actually did was just make me wonder why they're even friends in the first place. And that makes me so angry because their friendship is so important and wonderful. But despite those few things and my anger at the last one, this movie is so enjoyable for me to watch that I can't deny that it's on the top of my list of Little Women adaptations. And here's where I remind you to let me know in the comments what you thought of these two adaptations. I seriously have a lot more that I could say and I would love to talk to you about it, but I was trying to keep this video on the not so lengthy side. Make sure you subscribe because I'm going to be back in 2 weeks doing a video on the 78 and 94 versions and probably a little overall comparison among the four. And please check out our podcast on iTunes where we will very soon have a podcast out on Louisa May Alcott's novel. That link and all of those to our social media is in the info section. Until next time, Rodrigo, save me!